Okay, thank you everyone for being at today's meeting of the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Committee. We would like to start today with the discussion of African American Affairs Board. And we have Dr. Caesar from the Office of Equity Inclusion who will guide us through this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Baldwin. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start off by just framing up this conversation on board development with just an explanation of human relations and the work that the board does. So give me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen.
And while she is doing that, Mayor, if I may, I would like to introduce to the committee and to the community as well, Evan Raleigh, Assistant City Manager for Community. And I will be transitioning this portion of my role over to Evan moving forward. So Evan will be the staff support. Although these issues are still very critical and near and dear to my heart, I will continue to work with the committee behind the scenes, but he will sort of kind of lead the way. And Mayor, he is all yours now to help provide support to you and making sure all of our agendas are on point for this committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to frame up this conversation with a discussion of human relations. So what is human relations? The work aims to help communities become more harmonious, respectful, and cohesive. It also safeguards against discriminatory acts. Historically, human relations commissions were created so that they could address specific community issues, whether it be issues of race relations or police community relations, or just really creating a unified and harmonious community. Back in the 50s, cities had a need to address various social problems, such as racial disparities in education and housing, and economic conditions and gender equality. This work continued into the 60s with the civil rights movement, where the cries for justice and fairness grew louder. So there was a greater intensity and a greater need for cities to come up with a solution that would work for the community. It looks like, oh gosh, it's me. Back in 1963, Governor Sanford was really proactive in thinking about what this could look like in North Carolina. And he created the North Carolina Good Neighbor Council. There were 55 localities created in 1964. And so with that, each locality had a commission that was dedicated to human rights work. In 1971, state level name was changed to the North Carolina Human Relations Council. So that's how we moved from Good Neighbor Council to Human Relations. But the thought behind it was still the same. The purpose was really to serve the specific needs of the community. And then in 1977, Raleigh established its own Human Relations Commission. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And then I'm going to pull up a different presentation, which will talk more about what it takes to develop a board and what that process is. So give me 1 second. All right. Right. All right, I'm sharing my screen again. Okay. So now we're going to look at the process of developing a board. Back on April 6th, Council recommended to continue the conversation on creating this board in the safe, vibrant, and healthy communities. So what I'd like to do is just frame up what that would look like. When you develop a board, there are 5 stages, and the first stage is pre-formation. That's the stage we're in now. We're looking at different options, and we're really trying to determine what's the best fit for Raleigh. After the pre-formation stage, then it moves to a council vote. An ordinance is created, the board development piece happens, and then finally a work plan. Formation can happen for a variety of different reasons. There could be a specific topic or an issue identified. For example, with the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board, we identified civic participation and also language access as being of concern. Additionally, with the community engagement piece, we took a different approach with the Police Advisory Board. For the Police Advisory Board, the focus was on engaging residents and understanding what their needs are and what were the ways we could actually build trust with RPD. For this conversation, we're taking a different approach. We're looking at the feasibility in this committee. So another part of the pre-formation is establishment of the purpose and role of the board. Is the board going to be advisory? Are there other boards that currently cover the topics that are of concern? And then we look at the impact specifically for African Americans, in this case, social, economic, and educational pursuits. Another option would be policy review. Could this board do or contribute to policy? And then finally, the last aspect is the cultural piece, where the focus is on connecting communities within the city. Board appointments. So as I mentioned before, when the board is created, there's also a creation of an ordinance, and that ordinance details the number of seats, the type of process they'll have, whether it's application process or interest form. And then there's an option to have positions designated by profession. This ordinance could also detail the possibility for the board to be linked in some other way. When we kicked this off, we talked about human relations, and human relations has a number of subcommittees that work on very similar issues to what this board could be. And then the ordinance also talks about term limitations, which is standard for any city board and commission. So what does board development look like? Once the board has been established, the ordinance has been created, now there's orientation for the board members. There's an election of leadership, bylaws development, and then work plan development. In order to staff this, the Office of Equity and Inclusion would need some additional resources. And typically we staff our boards with community relations analysts. There's already been a presentation put out by residents, and I just wanted to share this information with you all today so that you can see there's been a proposed mission, vision, and suggested membership. So I think at this point, I'm turning it over to Evan.
Thank you, Dr. Souza. So, Mayor, members of the committee, heard the overview from Dr. Souza. I will note that there are a couple of interested members of the public. I think two individuals who have led the charge to bring this board about that are on the call. Mayor, I'm not sure at what point you may want to recognize them and hear from them, but I do want to note that they are here and ready to offer some additional thoughts if the committee wishes to hear from them.
I would like Dr. Caesar to go back to the last slide again.
Okay. Are you all able to see it?
Yes, I didn't get a chance to read it thoroughly, so that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
So a question for you. You said we would need additional staffing. Have you looked at whether there's any other options? And have you also looked at their suggested membership here? Do we have any of these types of breakdowns within the Human Relations Commission? I guess I'm asking is is there, go on.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that there are opportunities to look at how to form this differently. And as it relates to human relations, we know that there's a housing piece. We know that they do work as it relates to police community relations. So all of these areas that are listed here, with the exception of physician, economic development or historian or sociologist, we don't currently have that representation, but the work that the Human Relations Commission does encompasses some of that. So, I mean, I think there's an opportunity to frame this up differently where an African-American subcommittee could come out of human relations. There's an opportunity to use the existing membership of human relations to support the work of an African-American Affairs Committee. So, for example, if we were to form it, having representation from the HRC also sit on the African-American Committee would help, particularly as it relates to coordinating some of the efforts. So the effort we're working on right now is doing this dive into Black history. So I think that would be a perfect synergy for the two, because it's really similar work. And we've got attorneys on the HRC, we've got folks in human services, we've got plenty of community liaisons. So I think the biggest piece is just how we want to set this up. Is it a subcommittee, or is it a standalone task force? What exactly is the direction in terms of how we want to set it up? And I think that'll dictate what this could look like, utilizing existing membership.
Okay. I know we have two folks who have signed up to speak. Is Contra Edwards on the line? And Dr. Caesar, if you could take down the presentation.
Good morning. This is Quanta Edwards, and I am on the line. And I have been listening to, what is being said. I don't feel like there's been further enough discussion for me to fully state, my viewpoints and opinions on this. But I am not in agreement with the African American Board being any other entity other than a standalone entity. I do believe that it needs to come under the Diversity and Inclusion Department, but not be under the Human Relations Commission at all. One of my biggest concerns about not having an African American Affairs Board has been, and I have stated this repeatedly, is that the needs of African Americans in the city of Raleigh are not fully addressed. I am more interested in that board looking at policy and being involved in as many intergovernmental departments and levels as possible, because I do not believe that there is a Black perspective or Black lens that is looked at policy thoroughly before decisions are made throughout the city of Raleigh. The particular professions that were chosen here were not chosen because they are a hybrid of the Human Relations Commission. It is actually chosen because there are some things that are never fully addressed by the Human Relations Commission. And I believe that the African American Affairs Board could actually resolve these matters. The city has way too many issues that I feel like data has already proven, so I'm not going to get into any of the data around these matters, but our city is not fully addressing them. And I feel like a very isolated board is what is needed. I don't believe that merging it with the Human Relations Commission is the way to go. I also am surprised to hear, because Dr. Caesar has been in part of those conversations with me, Serena, and Kim, and she has never brought forth any form of amalgamation or merging of any with the Human Relations Commission, because we would have been able to express to her that that was not the direction or angle to go. And she has been given that opportunity to speak on those things. So, and so I would like there to be a formation of a board that is separate from itself. That's all I have to say at this time about it, because I do believe I need to hear more about what people's ideas are as it relates to the city council, but I'm not in agreement with that at all.
So Quanta, could you give me some specific examples? You said that the city is making decisions without the voice of the African American population being heard. Can you give some specific examples of things that you would like to see worked on? And because right now that's very vague. So I just want to hear some specifics from you.
Okay, so for instance, there is currently a survey out right now that because the city is working with Shaw University with its, I think it's a racial policy department. I'm not real sure, but I did want to participate in that survey, right? Well, I called so that they could, because I didn't want to fill it out online, because I wanted to see how would it go if I actually called in the number, right? So I called in the number and she began to ask me those questions. And the options that she gave me was not a problem, it was a minor problem, or the issue was a moderate problem, okay? That was the only three options that she gave me in order for me to define my views around her questions. And I told her, there's absolutely no way that I would be able to participate in this survey because I don't believe any of these questions that you are asking are moderate problems. Because I was really surprised that they would put together a survey that would not have, this issue is not a problem, it's a minor problem, a moderate problem, or a major problem, and give people an opportunity to discuss why these things are major problems in the city of Raleigh. And I asked her, who came up with this kind of thing? Because it doesn't make sense that we have the statistics that we have in the city of Raleigh around racial discrimination, and you wouldn't have the option to even place that this is a major problem. So she told me that she agreed and that she would take this back to her team and she would have them reconfigure what the options would be, because there are people that you're going to talk to during these surveys who have had major problems based upon racial equity and discrimination. But I feel like if this was pivoted to an actual African American board, someone would have addressed the fact that this is a real issue in the African American community. There's no way you can just give the option. When you're talking about racial discrimination, you can't give just the option of it not being a problem at all, it being a mild problem, or just a moderate problem, because there's way too many African Americans who would disagree with just those three options.
Yeah, I did see a survey that had major problem on it. So I'm not sure what happened in the translation of that. That was, I think, Evan, since you are now, could we take a look at that survey, please?
Certainly, we can.
Yeah, because what I had seen was major, moderate,
Yes.
whatever.
And Mayor, I would just say, I believe, so that the survey that was just referenced was launched beginning of last week, and I think it actually closed either yesterday or today. So, but we can find out some more information. But I do believe that the survey that was out there is closing or coming close to being closed at this point. But we can certainly take a look.
Okay, well, that was my experience, and this is why she said she would reschedule with me, because she did need to take it back to the team and change those options, because those were the only three she gave me. So there's that. That's one example. So another example would be the one that just strikes me as a lightning bolt is, is previously when the city was discussing the formation of the PAB, which I call Police Accountability Board, the PAB. there was a consensus that, and when I say consensus, what I'm referring to, there was a consensus that the PAB didn't necessarily need to be formed because the only people who were asking for the PAB were the people who lived in District C. Okay? That was even openly stated at a political forum when people were asking about the formation of the PAB. However, when the city decided to actually go to each district and speak to the people in the community, I bore witness to people in my district saying very clearly that they wanted it. Okay. Now I spoke in my district, which was District B, and the consensus out of that was that people did want it. But I did attend the other meetings, and you very clearly heard that people wanted this. But I believe that if there was an African American Affairs Board, there could have been some education that could have been given to the city council and the city council staff as to why this needed to happen. Now, eventually it did happen, but I don't think the board ended up forming in a way that the general public intended it for it to be formed. And I feel like there's never enough educated, professional people of color, Black people, who would have been able to give that perspective at all, because it had already been decided, because people had been working on this for over 5 years, trying to get that police accountability board in place. And it was 5 years, in my opinion, way too late, because there just were not enough strong enough Black voices at the table pushing for this particular thing. And it ended up happening, but I don't know what your perspective is when you look at the PAB board, but it appears as though that board is not necessarily going in the direction that's going to benefit the community the most. I don't know what you see, but I know that's what I see whenever I watch those videos and those Zooms. There's not enough strong enough voices at the table to address those real issues around police accountability. It's almost like people are talking around what the real issues are, and they're not speaking directly to the issue.
So
all of the people, go ahead.
can I have our city attorney, we created this board within the legal realm of what we can do. So I would like the city attorney to speak to that, just so there's a clear understanding.
Yeah, the city has broad ability to create pretty much any kind of advisory board that it would like to assist the council on certain council decisions and actions and that type of thing. For a board to have any authority to have decision-making authority, binding decision-making authority, quasi-judicial authority, there has to be statutory authority, which would be given either statewide or by a local act. Neither exists right now. The same thing applies with the board being able to see certain types of evidence like body camera and personnel records and that type of thing. So right now, this board is empowered to do everything that the council pretty much has authority to give it to do. We'd have to get more power from the General Assembly to give it greater powers. Is that what you were looking for, Mayor?
Yeah, I think there's some confusion about what was created, and just wanted to clarify that what was created is what we can do legally based on state statute.
Well, and I will say that there have been bills filed in the General Assembly that would give those powers to municipalities. They have not been passed by the legislature, and we don't have any indication that they likely will be this session, but there have been requests made to the General Assembly to expand cities' powers. And so far, the only way that's done is if specific cities can get a local act to do it. And there have not been any of those in recently.
Okay, so I am aware of what I've followed the board and I've also followed legislation. So I am aware of what the limitations are. But the things I'm referring to is the fact that when the PAB and the city are working together, the issue is that what comes out of the community is not believed, right? So I don't know how it is that how the city perceives what the community is saying that's happening in the community, because it's not being dealt with as though you believe what the citizens are saying, right? Because there are people who have had things happen to them and they are reaching out to the PAB members, and there's some things I'm sure that you cannot discuss. But what never seems to happen is the city does not operate as though it believes its Black citizens. These things are happening in the community and they need to be believed. So how you manage what you are hearing in the community and the things that are presented to the city council, that is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the PAB. I'm not talking about the things that you cannot do because you're being held by the General Assembly. I am talking about the fact that there are people in the community who legitimately have problems with the police department, and they are seeking help from the city in a way that they feel safe. That is the part where you don't have a Black perspective telling you that. People, and I don't believe that people are telling you that because the city doesn't operate that way. They don't operate as though they believe these things are happening in their city, and they do not operate as though they want those things to stop.
Can you give me some specific examples?
Sure. So Raleigh Demands Justice did not want you to use 8 Can't Wait. They didn't want it because they felt as though it was going to be ineffective. And they gave very specific reasons in Raleigh why it wouldn't work for Raleigh. It might be working in other areas, but it's not working here. And I believe that all of those people who were, I know that Raleigh Demands Justice was a coalition, but those, I think it was 8 entities got together against 8 Can't Wait, but they were not believed. You still move forward with 8 Can't Wait. That's what you wanted to do. And that's what I'm saying. These coalitions that are working directly with Black people, they are coming to you, telling you these things, and they need to be believed.
Okay, I'm slightly confused, but
Okay, so
really.
okay, so I'm gonna see if I can put it to you this way. All right. When people had an issue directly with the police chief, right? The first question that I typically ask people from the city council is, do you believe that there is a problem with your police chief? If you don't believe that, you're not going to be able to get to the root and the heart of what's going on in the community. Because if the people who are greatly affected by the decisions that are made by your police chief are not believed when they are telling you that this is what's happening in the Black community, you're not going to get feedback. Just like whenever you guys put out this survey about what kind of police chief you're looking for, I don't think you're going to get the feedback that you're looking for. It's going to be little to none. And it's definitely ain't going to be no high concentration of Black people who are going to fill out that survey because they don't believe that you trust them about what's going on with policing. They don't believe you. So they're not filling it out. They certainly ain't going to fill out the section that's asking whether or not you are a female, a Black person, a person who's Indian or Asian. They're not going to fill that part out. And if they do fill it out, to be honest with you, they're going to lie. But only people who work and who spend time with those individuals in that community, those people are going to know. It's interesting how much people who have problems with the police, they're willing to talk to me, and I'm a real estate agent. They're willing to share these things with me, but they're not willing to come forward and talk to their city council or the city council staff because they don't believe that when they come to you, they are going to be heard. That's what they don't believe.
I still am searching for some examples. I mean, if we are going to have a open conversation,
Mm-hmm.
when people come to talk to you, Quanta, what are they saying to you? That's the part that's missing for me.
Okay. All right. When they're talking to me, one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that when the city, okay, well, one of the things that they're talking about is the fact that they believe that the city is running and dashing to provide the needs of what John Kane Realty wants, right? But when you look at your 10-year comprehensive plan, it is very clear that you need housing for a particular set of people who make a particular amount of money, who can afford housing at a particular price. And that the city is more interested in luxury building because of your votes, okay? But you are not having robust conversations that are leading to the building of the largest gap of people who need to be served for housing in the city of Raleigh. Is that more specific? Is that helping you?
Yes, Kim also posted in the chat that she had some examples. So I'm going to ask committee members, do you have any additional follow-up questions for Quanta? Councilmember Cox?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank her for her comments. I think they were actually very clear and really does a good job at summarizing the concerns. And I want to say I agree with her that I support the formation of an African American Affairs Board going forward. But we'll continue to hear more from the public.
Yep. So Concha, thank you for participating today. I'm going to call Kimberly, Dr. Kimberly Mukhtarian next.
Thank you, Mayor Baldwin, council members, to our newly assistant manager, city manager, welcome aboard. I am Dr. Kimberly Mukhtarian, and thank you, Quanta, for laying out such a very eloquent way of expressing the Black voices of Raleigh. Let me say, and I don't know how to, unmute my face or what have you. However, it's not necessary. What I will say is this. I think, again, we're back at square one where we as a people ask for something and then we're offered something else. I think we made it very clear that we want an African American Affairs Board, not an advisory board. Why? Because our affairs are very much laid before you on a daily basis. And we have advised the city on numerous occasions. However, our advice have been ignored. And, you know, Mayor Baldwin did ask for specifics, so I'll give you that. Back in 2015, we asked and advised the city of Raleigh to provide us with body cameras, body-worn cameras for police officers. We asked specifically and advised the council to purchase an officer pulls his service weapon. This would eliminate any human error that would befall an officer if he's in pursuit or if he's, you know, he forgets to turn on his body camera. And though we asked, and I do have the documentation that was sent to the city by PACT, Police Accountability Community Task Force, another task force, of which we advised from the community at large, our city council. And they didn't. They bought $4.7 million worth of body camera footage that needed the turn on by officers individually. In doing so, we witnessed Sohail Majarad, who died on April the 20th, 2019, where he engaged an officer And in doing so, the officer forgot to turn on his body camera. Those body cameras were not asked for by the police department. They were asked for by public citizens. And the citizens of Raleigh, again, were left without explanation. We didn't try to create guilt or innocence. I think what we asked for is just transparency. And we received $5 million worth of no transparency. And I think that's very hypocritical when we ask or we advise and we don't get what we ask for in return. Yet these body cameras are purchased in the name of citizens. Without citizens, you can't purchase body cameras. There's no need for them. And again, advice versus affairs, our affairs have to be looked at differently. And of course, you already have so much of that layout of people that are already serving in capacities of housing, so forth and so on, yet we still see these problems. And probably because they're advising and nobody's responding adequately to our issues. I listened to you all. Dr. Caesar sent me the link of the social equity retreat, which you all, saw videos and heard Marvin Gaye, and you went through the formalities of addressing finally our issues. Well, I want to know what kept you so numb for the last 10 years. What has allowed you not to look at our issues? And is it enough to address our issues? Because it's now taken 2021 for you all to address them. I would ask that the reason why we are specifically outlining the way we want this done is because we can't wait another 10 years, Mayor Baldwin. We can't allow these continued cycles where we engage, but we get nothing back because, as you know, we have had 7 deaths by RPD in 7 years, of which none of them were worthy to get a dime. Yet, we are honoring George Floyd, who received $27 million, not because he was deserving, but because it was transparent. And if we do not have 100% transparency, then there's no need to form this board. And I don't believe that we would get it in any other form than what we've already asked for. Now I have several more examples. But, I think I've said enough there for you all to respond as to why we need any of this, for that matter.
Kimberly, I would like to hear some more specific examples, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I think the general, for instance, we just had an officer during the George Floyd protest state he likes to run down protesters with a cop car. Well, that cop car belongs to the citizens of Raleigh, and he is supposed to protect the citizens during protests, not get his fetish on destroying or running down protesters. That looks like a Charlottesville, Virginia situation. And we don't know if he's on the streets. We don't know if he was fired, reprimanded. We know absolutely nothing. But for our city officials or city servants to not provide us with that information, because just recently, a staff member from Greensboro wouldn't even address an African-American woman by doctor. And the city council unanimously voted to have this staff member removed. That brought so much consolation to an African-American woman who fights daily to maintain not just a place of value, but to keep from being devalued in every form. We still don't know from our city officials, yet you serve on safety, viable, healthy. None of those things seem to match when we ask you, out of 800 officers, if this officer is still employed with Raleigh's police department. I think we have a whole lot of language, we have a lot of jargon, We have a whole lot of propaganda that sounds good, but in actuality and application, we have delay, we have disregard, we have cover, protections that do not belong to us. And when I hear that the attorney of the city of Raleigh, their job is to protect the city, I'm going to ask you in 2021, who is actually protecting African Americans? Because obviously we're not protected. It seems more like we're more managed. And I do not want to create a board where we're back to management and no real protections.
So Kimberly, to follow up on that, what do you envision? I think, I don't know if it was you or Conta who said, African American Affairs Board. You said this, that's somehow different. Can you articulate what specifically you're looking for this board to do? And how do you see this working?
I'm sorry, say that part one more time.
Yeah, could you kind of outline what you see this board doing specifically? Like, what is, I know there was a mission there that we had seen, but I want to, like, if we're going to do something like this, I want to make sure it's something, number one, we can do, and number two, that we don't get flipped on later and say, well, that's not what we intended. So I just want to know what the intention is with the board.
Well, I think our intention is protection. We don't need qualified immunity. We need fair and honest protection that keeps us from becoming exploited, from becoming devalued, displaced, replaced. And, if we can look at things from hindsight and see where things are going before they go, that example of making sure that we get equipment that protects us, because that equipment does. How do we guarantee that even the advice that we give you, if you don't take it, who is responsible for that? Because we gave you advice. We asked you for something that will protect both us and the police department. And another young man is dead of African American descent or a person of color. And no one wants to address that issue. How do we protect ourselves when our city fails to protect us? Protection is our only agenda, so that we can move on from being in fear of our lives and actually enjoying life. We would like to excel to the place where you can see us downtown as well. We don't have to be invited. We can actually feel a part of downtown. Our presence is just not the bus or the courthouse. We would like to be a part of your entire city, because certain places we are not a part of. But that we have to come out of survival mode first. And that portion is what we want to do. And you can find those portions of survival from your 30% AMI, from housing, from mental health, from drug abuse, and every last listing of categories. You can see our levels of survival in every definition of those categories. And we would like to move our people forward so that we can be a part of a city that is thriving and that is on this top list where everyone wants to be.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake, even with an African American Affairs Board, ultimately, I guess it would be up to City Council to make decisions. So it's still an advisory board. Is there clarity on that?
Well, no, it's really not. It's an affairs, because if it comes to a place where you don't take our advice, but it costs us, because honestly, African Americans, when you don't listen to us, have to absorb that value. That once you don't listen, we absorb it in death. We absorb it in low housing, where another population can now capitalize off you not listening. So when we look at an issue, whereas we say we've been exploited or something is going on in our communities that need immediate attention, and you don't listen, or you fix it in the manner by which you think it should be fixed, what tends to happen is another population comes in and they flip our despair at our expense, but their value. And you will take a place of 30% because we've been oppressed in the area and market it at fair market value at 400%. That's because our advice wasn't listened to. So we would like to move it to an affairs where we say, if the city is not performing in a manner that protects this vulnerable population, how can we protect you from you? Because honestly, when we looked at your social equity video, you related that you didn't even know most of your sanitation workers were Black. The majority of your workers in the busing and the ridership is also Black. So when you start talking about who is in, I can give you the research, I can give you the reality and a video. How do you protect us from these types of exploitation where you can see it in plain view? I can advise you, but you refuse to look. How do we protect us from you? How do we protect us from human nature? And I think that is the problem that we've had all along. We can create a human relations board. We can call it humanity. We can call it HHH. And I promise you tomorrow, African Americans will suffer from somebody not being human. We can send all your police officers to racial equity class for as many hours or continue education as possible. We can advise them to go. We can make them go. We can make it mandatory. How do we protect ourselves from that?
Okay. Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Dr. Mokhtarian? Okay. So one thing, Dr. Caesar has disappeared. One thing I think we need more information on is exactly what resources you're going to need and what the cost of that would be to ensure that they are included in the budget. Dr. Caesar, are you there? Okay.
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, have you already looked at that? Because that wasn't presented to us today. You did indicate that you would need additional staffing.
Correct. And we're looking at one community relations analyst. We can prepare that and write it up and tell you exactly what we would need.
Okay, if you could do that and follow up with the committee, that would be helpful. I was going to make a recommendation that we hold this in committee until we get that information and then see how we might be able to move forward. Dr. Caesar, I want you to come prepared at the next meeting to outline what a plan would be to move forward and how that would be, and then how it would be funded and staffed. Okay? Councilmember Cox?
Yes, I would also ask that staff come back with details about the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board and about how that is structured and how that would compare contrast to the proposed African American Affairs Board.
I don't think there would be a big contrast just in terms of makeup. It seems to me that this is kind of outlining that, or what they have suggested with the different groupings and identities. I think that's what Dr. Caesar did with the Hispanic and Immigrants Affairs Board. So I think we have a good model there.
I think it'd be good to get a presentation on that and to understand why that is a board and not a subcommittee of the Human Relations Commission.
Okay, Councilmember Buffkin, Councilmember Fort, any additional questions or comments at this time?
I don't have any. I'm curious to see what the staff brings back at the next meeting.
Okay, Councilmember Buffkin? Okay, all right, well, please get the information regarding the survey, and just ensure that, my understanding is that there were 4 items there. One was not a problem, minor problem, moderate problem, serious problem. Can we just take a look at that and ensure that that is what was done over the phone as well? And then, if the survey has been cut off, let's look at potentially extending that so we can gather more information.
Mayor Baldwin, I did have a chance to pull that survey up quickly during the discussion, and it is still live. And I can actually, it's a 7-question survey. I'd be happy to share it with you and the rest of the committee so that you can see the details on it if you care to see it. But it does lay out, kind of as you pointed to, varying degrees of issues that folks can respond to. So I'd be happy to share that information with you and the rest of the committee.
Yeah, if you could do that with your follow-up, that would be very helpful.
Certainly.
Okay. All right, well, I want to thank Quanta and Dr. Mukhtarian for joining us today. And we will take this up with more information at our June meeting. Okay? All right, thank you, everybody. This meeting is now adjourned.